how the Jesus myth was created, how Christianity was started. This awareness wishes to remind you that the story of Jesus, the first written word, was that which was put down some 80 years after his existence on this plane, that it wishes also to inform you that the composite known as the entity Jesus was that which was put together from a variety of information. This awareness indicates that essentially, under Constantine, the concept of the Catholic or universal, Catholic meaning universal, religion, the official Roman religion, as that which was a composite of various religious writings which were brought together to form that which is known as the Christian religion. That many of the writings were assembled from various sources, and brought into, and comprised those books of the Bible. The evolution of the Bible. This awareness suggests, there is a book by Lloyd Graham titled Deceptions and Myths in the Bible, that this book goes into the origin of the stories that have been related in the Old Testament, especially in the Old Testament, which were literally taken, in many cases word for word, or concept for concept from earlier writings. For example, the story of Noah and his 4 sons having been taken from writings which long predated the stories in the Old Testament and which used terms and names for the sons which were identical to those reported in the Old Testament. This awareness indicates that the story of Moses as having been stolen from a Syrian myth that had come down in relation to an entity named Mrs. This awareness indicates that a great number of the stories within the Old Testament were simply the result of the Hebrew priests attempting to create a set of myths and stories by which they could organize their own religion, their own philosophy, in order to form a more cohesive society in those days. This awareness indicates that the works of Lloyd Graham go deeply into finding these earlier stories from Babylon, which was the source of the story of the Garden of Eden, through Syrian and other cultures and Indian records and stories of India. This awareness indicates that even the New Testament is assembled from patterns related to stories taken from earlier sources, such as Zoroastrian, Mithraean, Krishna, Buddhism, and Egyptian, and others, in which many verses are literally paraphrasing earlier writings, and many of the stories attributed to the story of Jesus, were lifted directly out of these other writings. The story of Jesus at the well, as one which was taken from earlier writings. This awareness indicates that it is of importance that entities realize the origins of the Bible did not come from the pen of God, but came from the earlier writings in different cultures and nations at the time these Hebrew priests put this work together. This awareness indicates that these countries who were plagiarized then became labeled as heathen. Nations whose philosophies were heathenistic, but this was only after their stories had been stolen. How symbols influence entities. This awareness indicates that throughout most of this, past, 2,000-year period of the Persian Age, entities have become more inclined toward open and shallow interpretation of stories at face value, rather than looking more deeply at hidden meanings. It has been the advent of psychology to bring back the significance of symbolism, for in Freud's concern for the dream state, it emphasized the significance of symbols, and as symbols began to become more significant, entities began to recognize symbolism in other levels that had previously been ignored or forgotten. This awareness indicates, however, in the past most of the emphasis in secret schools was on symbolism rather than on rational messages. This awareness indicates that the rituals that have been come down in churches, especially the Catholic Church, are actually symbolism. The bowing of the knee on the altar, and the various rituals that take place have certain symbolic meaning, and this symbolism is that which the subconscious understand better than the rational mind. This awareness indicates that if entities cannot and do not receive training or teaching in the significance and meaning of symbols, they become victims of those who understand the power and control available through the manipulation of symbols. How the Jesus myth was created. First of all, you have to realize that Jesus was a composite of different entities, and the name was chosen several hundred years later at the Council of Nicaea, wherein the entity Constantine ordered the various religious sects to come together and create a single religion for Rome, a universal religion that incorporated all of the aspects of the various religions, so that all could accept and subscribe to it. The influence of Apollonius of Tyana. Read also about Apollonius of Tyana, the real Christ. The invented story of Jesus. This entity Apollonius of Tyana is the central figure of a certain religious order that was prevalent at that time in Rome, and his life was incorporated into the Holy Roman religion or Catholic version of the Christian epic, which became the official Roman religion in approximately 300 AD. This awareness indicates that this energy of Apollonius was incorporated. There was also energies of several other spiritual leaders of Roman religious sects whose stories were also brought in, and there were those spiritual personalities or deities from other Roman religious orders whose histories or religious myths came from other cultures. Krishna, for example, of India, was one of the religious cults and groups in Rome, and his story was merged with that of Apollonius of Tyana. The story of Krishna, as that entity who came into the earth born of a virgin and who attempted to save people from error and sin, but who was hanged for his efforts. This awareness indicates that this was incorporated in the story of Jesus, and the Apollonius story was also part of this story, and there were also entities whose religion was that of sun worshipping, wherein there was the sun and the 12 houses or signs. And these sun worshippers had their story of Jesus, in which the sun god had 12 disciples, and these 12 disciples of course reflected the 12 signs of those who were the sun worshippers in Rome. This was of course an astrological religion. The composite known as Jesus. This awareness indicates that the combination of the many different Roman religious orders or organizations, the different religious sects, forming a composite in which the central heroic character was the Son of God, having 12 disciples, being born of a virgin, whose intent and purpose was to help save mankind, and for his efforts, the entity was slain and put upon a cross. The entity also having certain miraculous powers, including that of those who can heal by touch, or raise from the dead, or move into states of suspended animation, such as some of the masters of India have demonstrated in various times throughout history. Catholic Church tried to destroy Jesus and his family. Thus, one aspect of this composite known as Jesus moved west to India, and into Kashmir, and was recorded as having been the entity known as Jesus, and lived there to a ripe age. Another aspect of this composite moved eastward along with the Holy Family, and bore a child through Mary Magdalene. This awareness indicates this was known as the Holy Family, which the Catholic Church made every effort to eradicate and destroy and remove any trace of the information surrounding that entity. but which the Templars made every effort to preserve and to promote and carry on that holy bloodline, even to the point of some 100 years later, taking the Holy Family, the descendants of the Holy Family, into the New World, through Newfoundland and into what was later to be called the United States. This awareness indicates that in this sense, the entity that contributed to the composite known as Jesus went westward, while another entity who contributed to the composite known as Jesus went eastward. This awareness indicates there were, of course, still others. This awareness indicates that in attempting to discuss the story of Jesus in a traditional way opens a Pandora's box of discrepancies, when you approach or seek the truth of the matter, because the Jesus of the Bible, being a composite of many different entities, or several different entities, is not the true story. New World Order also creating a mythical Christ for the New Age. It is a creation of a myth for the people of Rome to center on, much as is now being created by the efforts of the New World Order to establish a new religious order, a one-world religion that all entities can use as a kind of compromise, whereby in time, the entity known as Christ in the Christian mythology, and the entity known as Muhammad and the entities of Eastern religions, from Buddha, to Confucius, to the various different religious leaders of different religions of the world, will all be partially represented in a new composite. Whether this will be the culmination of a being known as the Antichrist for some, or the new Messiah for others, is still to be determined, but it is much like that action of trying to bring all religions together. This awareness indicates what occurred in Rome was a political effort by Constantine to gather the energies of conflicting religious groups and to bring them together to stop the warring and fighting between these groups that was tearing Rome apart. The action of Constantine was that he informed those religious leaders of the various warring sects in Rome that if they did not come together and join in some kind of compromise religion, their religion would not be recognized or legal in Rome. Thus, most of those came and put their best effort into giving their particular religious dogma and values and their deity into the compromise that was formed, which became the Holy Roman Catholic religion, Catholic meaning universal. This awareness indicates that in this action, these entities were not totally satisfied. No one was completely satisfied, but each had contributed part of their religion and they could feel secure that their religion would be preserved, buried in the Christian religion. The name Jesus was chosen as the name of the hero, or centerpiece of the religion, because it meant neither he nor she. It was a neutral word. Many names including Zeus were considered. There were those who had proposed the name Zeus, but many objected because Zeus was a Greek god and the Romans wanted nothing to do with Greek gods. Therefore they sought to find a Roman name, or a name that was neutral, which Rome could use as its own god, and the name that came eventually to the forefront was the name Jesus, or Jesus, pronounced Jesus. And it was a Hebrew term that meant neither he nor she. It was neutral. The further name of Christ was originally Christos. Jesus Christos, and Christos meant the clear one, or enlightened one, or Jesus the enlightened one. The Christ identity had been traditionally recognized long before this time. The Greek had a character whose name was Crestus, and Crestus or crest meant the height or the top, and there were the various other types of Christs. There were many Christs prior to Jesus. There was a black Christ or Christed One in certain cultures, and other cultures had their version of the Christed One. In India it was known as Krishna. This awareness indicates that Krishna is the Indian version of a Christed being. There were many Christs prior to Jesus. The term was used even as far back as Atlantis, and therefore, when they sought for a further defining term to call their new composite in the new religion of Rome, the concept of Jesus Christos, Jesus the Christ, was the result, and most entities could accept that because they had no hostility toward either term. The value of the myth is real but historically is false. The value of the myth is absolutely totally real, and its effect on entities is absolutely totally real, but the historical aspects have been distorted so that when people speak of a shroud that covered Jesus, even if it were the genuine shroud, it might actually have been a shroud that covered someone else, Apollonius perhaps, or some other entity who died upon a cross in the company of thousands of otherwise who died upon the cross during that time. This awareness indicates there was of course an entity whose name was Jesus, and this entity came from Nazareth, lived in the area of Nazareth, and therefore, there was an entity Jesus of Nazareth who was one of the various entities in the composite, but much of the information attributed to the composite was information relating to other entities, Apollonius of Tyana for one, Krishna for another, and the sun god of the Roman sun worshippers Helios as another. This awareness indicates it realizes this is extremely confusing to many people. It does not expect entities to fully understand this, nor does it care whether entities accept this. This awareness is only dedicated to giving truth as it sees it in response to questions asked. Biblical miracles and stories came from earlier sources. This awareness indicates the story of the water in the well and washing the feet, and healing the blind man can be found in earlier religious writings from other sources, other cultures previous to the Christian story. These are documented in earlier cultural writings from other areas of the world, and were included in the Christian story as part of the total composite of a mythical creation that could serve as a religion for the Roman people. How Jesus survived the crucifixion. This awareness indicates it appears that the story of Jesus of Nazareth, that this entity had a following and was the one who was crucified on the cross, that the entity Jesus of Nazareth in his sojourns had learned much from studying with Indian teachings. This entity had learned, for example, the art of moving into suspended animation, and when the entity was crucified, he gave the appearance of being dead, by moving into a state of suspended animation. Once it was assumed that he was dead, he was removed and placed into a tomb, and later resurrected. This awareness indicates that this is the entity who went with Mary Magdalene in the direction of France and England. This awareness indicates that the entity from Tyana went westward toward India, and many of his experiences later were attributed to, were associated with and reflections of the story of Christ, and therefore, it was presumed that he was the Christ. This awareness indicates that in understanding that these entities were each contributors to the story of Jesus the Christ, one can see how there could be many different forms of evidence of the Christ story continuing in different directions. This awareness indicates it would also be possible for entities to trace Krishna through certain forms of evidence, to suggest that Krishna had moved into the time known as the Christian era, and had reincarnated and was indeed the entity Jesus the Christ. The argument would be as such: there is a great similarity between Krishna and Christ, therefore, because of these and these and these events, it would imply that Krishna reincarnated and carried on his work in the Holy Land during the time of early Rome. This awareness indicates that this would appear to be some kind of evidence that some entities would accept and further the belief that Krishna was an earlier incarnation of Jesus the Christ, that is, unless it was understood that the story of Jesus was a composite which included information that came from the story of Jesus of Nazareth, information that came from the life of Apollonius of Tyana and other great teachers that had been studied by those who put together the Christian doctrine. The book, The World's 16 Crucified Saviors or Christianity Before Christ. This awareness indicates that there is a book which entities should study if they are further interested in this. It is titled 16 Crucified Saviors or Christianity Before Christ, something to that effect. This awareness indicates that it tells of the various parallels to the Christian story from earlier writings of other cultures, wherein the hero of those earlier cultures and writings experienced or acted out the same kind of activities as did the later Jesus Christ in the Christian religion, these down to details, such as the washing of the feet, healing the blind, and raising of the dead, and similar teachings to that of Jesus, and also the virgin birth and being hanged or otherwise killed for this effort. This awareness indicates that the Krishna parallel is the one which contains the most similar experiences, but there are also a number of others, a total of 16 saviors in all, whose lives parallel Jesus, even in some of the exact situations. Awareness has discussed the last taboo area, why people accept a religion without much question. This awareness indicates that it has covered an area that it previously listed as one of the last areas of taboo, discussing Christianity and religion. This awareness indicates that it is amazing how religion can get started and grow and become so powerful. At some point, money becomes extremely important in a religion, and when money begins to take on its extreme importance, when a religion becomes well funded by a people, the religion grows ever so quickly and becomes much more established in a material sense, and therefore its roots become strong and it grows even without close examination. Jehovah's Witness and Mormons prevent challenges. In some cases, entities will take extreme action to hide any challenge or to quell any challenge to the religion. This was done in Christianity. This awareness indicates it has also been accomplished in a number of other religions, including the Mormon Church and the Jehovah's Witnesses. This awareness indicates that as entities see their religion growing, it makes more entities feel the religion must have validity, or why would it grow so much, and therefore, they jump on the bandwagon, so to speak, simply because that's what everyone is doing. This awareness indicates, in other words, the stronger the growth of a religion, the more quickly and easily it is accepted without discernment as to its validity. At the beginning, our religion struggles from the belief of a few people. This awareness indicates that eventually, those few people fade and others take it on, and without questioning, the religion is eventually accepted by others simply because someone says, "This is the one." And that is enough for some entities, and then they become fanatical about their religion. Most people never stop to question the origin or the validity of their religion. They simply accept the claims promoted by the religion and its promoters. This awareness indicates that it is like a steamroller or a locomotive. It is hard to get started, but once it starts rolling, it is almost impossible to stop. Remember, always be allowed to doubt, to question. This awareness indicates that it wishes entities to recognize the need for always being allowed to question, to explore, and not be forced into belief of anything. You may accept something partially, believe something, but keep some of your doubts at all times in order to evaluate the concepts and ideas, which you hold clear, for that creates a healthy mind, one which is not closed by some programming, but one which can evaluate, study and explore from evidence. This awareness reminds you, the mind is never truly thinking until it turns and questions everything it knows.